Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. In this session, we'll explore how electronic and digital identity documents are shaping the future of civil aviation, from internationally standardized travel documents like ePassports digital travel credentials to supporting instruments such as EIDs and mobile driver's licenses. We will focus on their structure, security, standards, and practical use. And most importantly, we will clarify where these documents fit in the passenger journey and where they do not. Before we start, my name is Arif Mamedov and I'm the CEO of Regular Forensics. I lead our operations and strategic partnerships across North, Central, and Latin Americas, as well as I am heavily involved in Regular's operations on the global scale. That's all about me. Let's move on. Digital identity is fundamentally reshaping civil aviation, from how passengers check in to how they board the planes and how their identities are verified through the journey. But the term digital ID means very different things in different contexts. Not every digital credential can be used at the border. Some documents follow ICAO standards, others don't, but still play an important role before the travel can reach passport control. Today's session is meant to clarify these distinctions and show how they all fit together in the broader identity verification ecosystem. Let's start by clarifying what we meant by eMRTDs and digital IDs. On this slide, we want to show the distinction between two major types of identity documents: ICAO-compliant electron machine-readable travel documents and other forms of digital IDs. eMRTDs, such as an electronic passport and ID card, follow specifications outlined in the Doc 9303 and are used for the international travel. Digital IDs, on the other hand, can vary widely in the format and application and may not necessarily be accepted for cross-border unless they comply with the same standard as outlined in the Doc 9303. Why are these types of IDs even needed? In today's world, so much of interaction from banking to travel happens digitally. We need a way to prove identity electronically that is both secure and flexible. Digital IDs let individuals verify who they are without always carrying a physical document. That makes things faster and easier for users, and more secure and efficient for governments and businesses. They also reduce the need for manual checks and help unlock economic value by simplifying access to services, reducing fraud, and supporting inclusion. But of course, not all digital IDs are created equal, and that's exactly what we're going to explore. When we talk about electronic identity documents in aviation, we typically refer to three categories. First, ePassport, which is the standard ICAO-compliant travel document defined in Doc 9303. It contains a chip storing personal and biometric data and is used locally for border control. Then the electronic national ID cards, EIDs. If used for the international travel, they must be ICAO-compliant eMRTDs. This means they follow the same standard as ePassport and are accepted when the receiving state allows it. Finally, electronic driver's licenses, EDLs. These are mostly used domestically and are not ICAO-compliant travel documents. Still, they can support pre-travel identity checks or airport processes, depending on the local regulation. It is important to distinguish between the EIDs in general and electronic machine-readable travel documents, which are ICAO-compliant EIDs used specifically for the international travel purposes. This slide shows what is stored on the chip of an ICAO-compliant ePassport. Each file on the chip is called a data group or DG. DG1 includes basic personal details like name, nationality, and date of birth, the same information found in the MRZ, machine-readable zone. DG2 contains the holder's photo. DG3 and DG4 are used for fingerprints and iris scans, and access to them is restricted. DG7 stores the digital signature. DG14 and DG15 hold cryptographic information used for chip and active authentication. DG13 is reserved for the national use. Each data group is stored separately, which improves both privacy and security. Access can be controlled based on who is requesting the data and why. For example, routine checks versus border control. ICAO sets international standards for machine-readable travel documents. defined in the Doc 9303 and supported by the Annex 9 of the Chicago Convention. According to these standards, ePassport, digital travel credentials, and eMRTDs, including those in TD1 format, are considered ICAO compliant. At the same time, many national EIDs may look like ICAO compliant documents but are not actually issued as eMRTDs. That's an important distinction. Only when they follow the full ICAO specifications and are issued for the international travel purposes can they be considered compliant. Other digital identity documents, like mobile driver's licenses or electronic driver's licenses, are not covered by ICAO standards, but they still serve as an important role in domestic and pre-travel identity verification workflows, depending on local regulations, of course. So when we talk about compliance, we need to clearly separate documents designed for cross-border travel, which must follow ICAO specs, from documents used in national or commercial processes that follow a different set of rules. ICAO Doc 9303 is the foundation for all machine-readable travel documents. It standardizes how data is structured on the document and in the chip, how security features are applied, and how different systems around the world can trust and verify that data. More recently, ICAO introduced the Digital Travel Credentials core principles to define how digital versions of travel documents should work. They don't just describe the format, they also address things like how DTCs are issued, how they can be validated, and how they integrate with border systems in a secure and privacy-conscious way. Together, these two frameworks ensure that identity documents, whether physical or digital, are interoperable and trustworthy across borders. Let's now focus on what we call biometric identity documents. Since 1980, the International Civil Aviation Organization has been working on standardizing travel documents to ensure they are globally accepted and secure. The very first attempt to use RFID technology in identity documents happened in Malaysia nearly 30 years ago with the issuance of an electronic passport. At that point, there were no formal specifications for this type of technology. In 2003, ICAO updated its standard to include specific requirements for machine-readable travel documents. This update covered not only the format and physical layout, but also introduced guidelines on the use of embedded chips. These chips store both biographic and biometric data, and the symbol shown on this slide is now a common visual marker for such documents. You'll find this chip symbol on many types of credentials, including ePassport, biometric passports, and electronic IDs. The embedded RFID chip supports wireless communication with compatible devices, making verification process faster and enabling contactless identity checks. When we talk about protecting and verifying the RFID chip in an electronic identity document, there are two main layers we need to consider: access control and authentication. On the access control side, ICAO currently recognizes two mechanisms: PACE, which has largely replaced the older BAC, and it used to securely establish a connection with the chip; EAC, which adds another layer of protection for sensitive biometric data like fingerprints or iris images. As for chip authentication, we now present this in two categories to make it clearly. Data authentication, which is done through passive authentication, verifying that the data on the chip hasn't been altered and it was signed by a trusted authority; and anti-cloning protection, which is handled by active authentications and/or chip authentication. These methods ensure that the chip is genuine and hasn't been copied. Once the chip is accessed, there are two key steps to verify the integrity and authenticity of the data. The first is data authentication, which uses passive authentication. It checks that the data hasn't been altered and was signed by a trusted authority, using a country signing certificate and document signer certificate. The second is anti-cloning protection. This ensures that the chip is genuine and hasn't been copied. It can be done using active authentication or chip authentication, depending on the document capabilities. These mechanisms work together to ensure that the document is valid, trustworthy, and has not been tampered with. Let's compare the two main ICAO-related identity documents, ePassport and Digital Travel Credentials, or DTCs. First, we have storage. For ePassports, all the personal and biometric data is stored on a chip embedded in the physical document. In contrast, a DTC stores that data either on the traveler's personal device, like a smartphone, or in a secure cloud environment. When it comes to standard, ePassports follow the long-established ICAO DOC 9303. DTCs, on the other hand, are governed by the newer DTC core principles, which were developed to guide digital equivalent of traditional passports. As for border crossing, e-passports are fully accepted around the world. DTCs are still in the pilot phase and are only being used in limited trials, but they are being actively tested in real-life international scenarios. Now, how are those documents linked to their holder? For e-passport, the link is established using biometrics stored on the chip. With DTCs, identity binding happens through the combination of the device itself and biometric verification. Finally, let's talk about issuance. E-passports are issued directly by national passport authorities. DTCs can be issued either by the state or by an entity delegated to do so on behalf of the state, depending on how the system is implemented. Let's now take a quick look at the mobile driver's licenses, or MDLs. In September 2021, the International Organization for Standardization introduced a dedicated standard for digital driver's licenses, ICAO or EIC 18013-5. This standard outlines how MDLs should be structured, issued, and used. It covers all technical aspects from data formatting and transmission protocols to authentication methods. A key part of the standard is something called VICAL, the Verified Issuer Certificate Authority List. It's a mechanism for securely sharing the public keys of trusted issuing authorities. In the US, AMVA, the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrations, runs a digital trust service that hosts and distributes the VICAL to all authorized participants. The system ensures that MDLs issued by trusted authorities can be verified reliably across jurisdictions. A mobile driver's license is a digital version of a traditional driver's license. It can be stored on a smartphone or other mobile devices. MDLs offer several benefits over traditional physical driver's licenses. Just to name a few, it is a digital version of a traditional driver's license. It allows for contactless transactions, selective personal data sharing during the identity verification, reduced risk of identity theft, high security with cryptography to make sure it can be hacked, streamlined identity verifications and digital onboarding, and lower cost associated with printing and distributing physical cards. Let's walk through how different types of identity documents are used through the air travel journey, from pre-travel all the way to boarding. Starting with pre-travel, this is where EIDs and mobile driver's licenses can help with things like mobile check-in, logging into the airline apps, or verifying HO identity before arriving at the airport. These are not ICAO-regulated processes. That means there is more flexibility. Airlines or service provider may choose to accept national-level IDs. At the airport, EIDs may also be accepted to access gates or kiosks depending on the country or carrier. This step is still optional and varies a lot by implementation. For border control and immigration, however, identity documents must follow international standards. Only ePassport, digital travel credentials, or other eMRTDs are valid here. The term eMRTDs here refers to any electronic machine-readable travel document defined by ICAO DOC 9303. Finally, during boarding, the situation again depends on the airline and designation. Some domestic carriers may accept a broader range of documents, while others require a formal match between the boarding pass and ePassport or other eMRTD. In summary, the use of EIDs and MDLs is growing, but when it comes to cross-border travel, ICAO-compliant eMRTDs remain the core requirement. We looked at what type of documents can be used and when. Now let's see how that plays out in real airport operations. Digital documents are already being used at various points at the travel process, for mobile check-in, fast-track access through the kiosks, biometric boarding, document scan and a backdrop, and re-verification during the self-transfers. These use cases are not future concepts, they are already in the pilot or in production in several countries. Also, I would like to highlight another insight from one of the recent regular surveys. It shows that digital documents revolutionize various industries that rely heavily on secure and efficient identity verification, especially in online transactions, 46%, which are becoming more common for many industries in online account opening, 38%. This trend not only streamlines onboarding but also bolsters security, illustrating the new ways we interact with services daily. And of course, it should be standardized and regulated, especially to eliminate compatibility issues. Despite the initiatives on issuing new digital formats of IDs, physical documents remain crucial. This is confirmed by our survey as well. The vast majority of organizations believe that physical documents are crucial at the moment and will continue to be in the near future. If we look at the financial industry, we see that in our daily life we have various payments options such as cash, bank checks, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Google Pay, physical or virtual credit cards, even biometric payments. And a shop should be able to accept at least several of these forms of payments. So the same applies to the identity documents. There are people with traditional documents, electronic passports, driver's licenses, electronic IDs, mobile driver's licenses, and so on. And no one should be discriminated against, so you should be able to process and verify each type of the ID. Let's wrap up by summarizing at where different types of identity documents are accepted during the passenger's journey. For booking and check-in, travelers may be able to use eMRTDs, MDLs, or even DTCs, depending on what the airline or airport supports. But at the border, only ICAO-compliant documents like ePassport or DTCs in pilot programs are accepted. Each touchpoint places different requirements on the level of identity assurance. That's why there is no single document that works everywhere, and the system must be able to handle a mix. This concludes our webinar. I hope this session helped you better understand the role of ICAO-compliant identity documents and how emerging technologies like EIDs and MDLs support secure and seamless journeys. Thank you for watching.